So I gather you have a Tu B'Shvat Seder? Some people do something like that. 4 cups of wine and other things.
How does it usually work, Tu B'Shvat Seder?
All right, so I'll tell you a little bit about it. I actually want to talk about Tu B'Shvat, but I'm not going to overlap. I really want to give you some halachic background. But the Tu B'Shvat Seder comes from a sefer, the generation after the Arizal. And the sefer is called Chemdas Hayomim. And Chemdas Hayomim is actually a very, very, very controversial sefer. I don't know what Chabad's position on it is, but among most Hasidim, they consider this to be a very holy sefer, and they use it for many, many minhagim that are based on Kabbalah. And the Chemdas Hayomim is quoted as a very, very distinguished and important sefer. But Rav Yaakov Emden took the position that it was written by an associate of Shabtai Tzvi, the false Mashiach, and it's totally treif. So as a result, the Chemdas Hayomim has a tremendous, everybody has opposite views. There are some that consider it Kodesh Kedoshim, and there are others that consider it to be forbidden to even own. So this is still a bit of an unresolved issue. Again, I don't know what the Rebbe's position was on this. I'd like to find out. But be it as it may, the Chemdas Hayomim does create a Seder al Pi Kabbalah for Tu B'Shvat. And the logic of it is that Tu B'Shvat is the Rosh Hashanah for trees. And the Torah says a human being is like a tree. This is in Devarim, Ki Parshas Ki Seitzei. And the Mefarshim explain we are like an upside-down tree, because a normal tree has its roots in the earth, and it goes towards Shemayim. We are the opposite. We have our roots, the Shirish, the root of our neshama, is in Shemayim with Hashem, and we grow, so to speak, into the earth. Maybe that's why we're so confused. We're upside down. We have vertigo and everything else, but we are an upside-down tree, meaning our yanika, our nurturance is min hashamayim. And Hashem put us in the world, dira b'tachtainim, because He wanted His godliness to be in this world. But if the idea is that a human being is like a tree, so all of the inyanim of his chadshus, of his renewal of Tu B'Shvat, are going to be relevant to us as human beings. And there are a lot of lessons, so many lessons from trees. First of all, it's a lesson not to despair, because look at it the following way. The winter is a time when things don't seem to be growing. All of the fruit has already been harvested. All of the leaves have already fallen down. You're in the middle of the winter. In some places, there's snow. All right, Eretz Yisrael is usually not snow, but like nothing seems to be growing. But what is happening deep inside the tree, and you can't see it from the outside, there is the sap that is rising from the roots. And from that sap, there's going to be new growth. There's going to be the flowers, and then from the flowers, the flower will drop, then you'll have the bud, and from the bud there'll be the fruit. So really, this shows you what's called the Pintel Yid, that even if a Jew looks like he's empty, he has no fruit, he has no flowers, he has no mitzvos, inside there is something that you never know that's there, that's vibrant, and that's alive, and will produce a life. So that itself is a very important lesson. It reminds us to look at every Jew, including ourselves, as having a great, great godly potential, like the tree, even when that potential is not always visible, right out from the outside. It also gives a person chizuk, because it reminds a person that in the rhythms of life, there are times of aliyah, going up, and times of going down. And sometimes the dormancy period is the necessary preparation for the going up. And therefore, the tree has to go through the winter cycle in order to have the renewal of spring. Tu B'Shvat is normally exactly 2 months before Pesach. This year, it's 3 months before Pesach because we have 2 Adars. But again, the 15th of Shvat is the beginning of the process that will culminate in the 15th of Nisan. The 15th of Nisan is the ripening of the fruit of Am Yisrael. The 15th of Shvat is the invisible hachana that takes place. By the way, I got a wedding invitation from somebody, and on the invitation, there was a word from the Rebbe, which was such a nice word. I'll share it with you. The Rebbe said, it's a leap year, right? So some people say, the year is too long. There's so long until Pesach. So this is what the Rebbe said. Maybe you heard this. The Rebbe said that Chazal say when Adar comes in, we're not yet in Adar, but Adar comes in, Marvin b'Simcha, you increase Simcha. So when there are 2 Adars, you have 2 months of Simcha. That's 60 days of Simcha, starting from the 30th of Shvat, which is the first day of Rosh Chodesh Adar. Now, the Rebbe then said, this is really a nice twist. There's an important principle about 60, which is very, very relevant to the laws of kashrus. I'm sure you may know this law. Let's imagine you have meat soup, and some milk falls into the meat soup. So is the soup treif? Because meat and milk you're not allowed to eat. Is it soup treif or not? So it depends how many more times the soup is keneged the milk. If you have 60 times the amount of milk that fell in, the milk gets nullified in the 60. This is called batel b'shishim. It's nullified in 60. Same thing in the opposite. If you have some meat gravy that falls into milk soup or whatever it would be. So, once again, if you have 60 times the milk, keneged the meat, batel b'shishim. So 60 in halacha is the number that nullifies the opposite. By the way, even by treif it's that way, not just by meat and milk. If you mamish et chazer, I know that probably most of us would be disgusted, we wouldn't want to eat it. But according to halacha, if some chazer fell into the kosher food, it would be nullified in 60. Now, you're not allowed to do it deliberately. You can't do it deliberately. I can't say, oh, I'd like a little milk in my meat soup. If you do it deliberately, then it's not nullified. But if an accident happens, it's batel b'shishim, right? So the Rebbe, all right, so that's known. That's not the Rebbe's chiddush. That's a well-known halacha. So the Rebbe says, though, if 60 nullifies the opposite, right? The 60 meat nullifies the milk, and 60 milk nullifies the meat, and 60 kosher nullifies the treif. So 60 days of simcha nullifies all the sadness and all of the disappointments in life. So therefore, this year we're very lucky because since we have 60 days of simcha, it's going to nullify all of the tsaros and all of the difficulties. That's a really wonderful, wonderful vort in which the leap year has a special koach of 2 months of simcha, and therefore we get the benefit of batel b'shishim. With respect to everything that is atzvus, everything that is considered to be sad. So, be it as it may, going back to Tu B'Shvat, though, Tu B'Shvat really reminds us of the hidden potential in a Jew, what's called the pintel yid, the spark of the Jew, that may not be visible on the outside, but it's in there, because the tree is dead, the tree is lifeless, the tree looks like nothing's happening. But inside, all of these processes are going on. You see, it's an amazing thing. And Tu B'Shvat is celebrating not the visible successes of life, because nothing's visible yet. The tree is going to look, I promise you, the tree will look exactly the same the day after Tu B'Shvat that it looked on the day before Tu B'Shvat. Externally, it looks the same, but something has happened. The sap has come up, the chiyos, the life is in there. Right, so that's the very important message generally of Tu B'Shvat, and of course Tu B'Shvat also reminds us to be grateful to Hashem for all of the beauties that He's put into the world. The Chayvas Halavavas, one of the great ethical svarim, going all the way back to the year 1000, before the Rambam even, writes that Hashem created a world in which many, many things are not necessary for survival. I mean, we have to eat, okay, given that reality, but there's no need for food to taste good, and there's no need for food to have colors. Hashem could have made a mush, like you get, right? Just some mush that doesn't taste like anything. It'll keep you alive. So why does Hashem create color, and why does He create taste, and why does He create music? All of this is just the chesed of giving us pleasures in life that is more than we need for survival. So it's not just Hashem keeps us alive. Obviously, that's the big one. But Hashem gives us all sorts of treats that go beyond what is necessary for survival. And this is a time of hakaras hatov for that. And that's why there's such an inyan to eat all sorts of different types of fruits. So now, let's talk about... Yeah.
What was the source again?
Didn't hear you.
What was the source?
Yeah, this is a sefer called Chemdas Hayamim. And as I say, the Sefer has a very controversial history. Now, the chapter of Tu B'Shvat was taken out and published in a separate Sefer called Pri Eitz Hadar, which means the fruit of the beautiful tree. And therefore, you can also get the Tu B'Shvat Seder in a smaller book called Pri Eitz Hadar. And it became very, very popular among Sfardim and among many Hasidim. Among the non-Hasidic Ashkenazim, it was not such a big deal. Although in recent years, people are doing it, just like a lot of Hasidic customs. For example, upsharing, giving a haircut to a 3-year-old, was never. I mean, it was not a non-Hasidic minhag, but now everybody does it. It just becomes something that everybody does. So Tu B'Shvat Seder, not everybody does, but a lot of people do it. And the Reform movement likes it a lot for some reason. They celebrate the environment and the like. So you'll see, if you look up Tu B'Shvat Seder on a computer, you will get like 100 Reform manuals, which I would not suggest you look to as authoritative, but still they're into the Tu B'Shvat Seder. So I just want to discuss a little bit Kabbalistically how it works. Yeah.
So the source that said that Hashem gives us extra pleasures and joys in life?
Yeah. That's the Chovas Halabavos.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. I misspoke. The Tu B'Shvat Seder is from Chemdas Hayamim, which is later. But the source that Hashem gives you pleasure beyond what you need for survival, that's in the Chovos Halabavos. Chovos Halabavos, there is no machlokus about that sefer. That sefer is one of the greatest ethical Sifrei Musar that we ever have. So Chovos Halabavos is absolutely everybody. Misnagdim, Chasidim, everybody looks at the Chovos Halabavos. In fact, the Rambam even says it was his father's favorite sefer, Chovos Halabavos. It was written in Arabic actually, but we have a translation in Hebrew, and it's been translated in English and the like. And that's an important idea, that Hashem's chesed is beyond the minimum. He doesn't just give us enough to stay alive, but he gives us pleasures in life. And the Talmud Yerushalmi says, and this is pretty amazing, that after 120 years, Hashem is going to hold you to account for every pleasure you could have got from the world that you didn't get. Now, at first glance, that sounds, what does that mean? I'm supposed to go out and drink and do all sorts of things. So obviously we mean in moderation, but a person should appreciate the world. A person shouldn't have the attitude, oh, the world is bad and I'm just going to live on bread and water. No, a person should understand Hashem put things in the world that we should come and give thanks to him by virtue of his kindness. Certainly, life is mainly, the most important part of life is the ruchnius, the avoda that we have. But the gashmias, this is a big theme of Hasidus generally, that we can take the physical of life and we can elevate it and sanctify it. So we don't reject the physical, we take the physical and we use it. Right? That's the idea of,
Who said this about Hashem's going to hold you accountable after?
This is the Talmud Yerushalmi. This is actually from the not from the Babylonian Gemara, but from the Yerushalmi Gemara. Okay, so basically, therefore, the Tu B'Shvat Seder, as a general theme, is really devoted to 4 ideas. They overlap a lot. Idea number 1 is the human being is compared to a tree in terms of hidden potential. Number 2, gratitude to Hashem for the beauties and diversities of taste and color that he puts into the world, Hakaras Hatov. The third idea is the idea that we can sanctify Hashem with the physical, even by eating and the like, that we don't sanctify Hashem only by spiritual things, but we sanctify Hashem even by the physical. And in fact, that's actually the inner meaning of Dira B'Tachtainim, right? The Alter Rebbe's famous expression, which is really from a Medrash, that Hashem wanted there to be a Dira, his dwelling place should be in the lowly world, right? Dira B'Tachtainim. The inner meaning of that is Hashem wants us to take the physical, that on one level is furthest away from Hashem, and infuse it with Kedusha and the like. That is the Dira. That is how you make a dwelling place for Hashem in the Tachtainim. And indeed, that is the theme in which the eating of Peiros on Tu B'Shvat is a tikkun, a rectification. This is the fourth idea for the Chet of Adam Harishain. Because what was the Chet of Adam Harishain? The eating of the fruit was a rebellion against Hashem. And now we eat the fruit to sanctify, to make a bracha and the like. So, based on this, there are two components.
What was the first reason you said?
The first reason was because the human being is compared to a tree, and therefore we look at the tree, and that teaches us about ourselves. Okay, so that's one idea. Gratitude is the other idea. The third idea is sanctifying the physical. The fourth idea is rectifying the sin of the Eitz Hadas, which was the original sin that caused the downfall of the human race. On Tu B'Shvat, we can rectify it by taking the same vehicle of sin and using it to elevate ourselves. Yeah, yeah.
What were you saying? I just missed it. When you said that we reflect the tree, but we're in the flip side? Like you...
Well, we're an upside down tree because
Why?
an earthly tree has its roots in the ground and it reaches up to heaven. We have our roots in heaven, and we come into the earth, right? So we're upside down in that way. Okay.
How does it fix Chet Hadas?
Well, because what you're doing is that the Chet of the Eitz Hadas was taking achila, taking eating, and using it to rebel against Hashem. Because Hashem said, don't eat. Here, what we're doing is we're taking peiros, and we are reciting brachos, and we are eating l'shem shamayim. So we're taking the very act that rebelled against Hashem, and we're using it to serve Hashem. Right? That's a tikkun. By the way, it's also brought down in many svarim that because this is the Rosh Hashanah for trees, one should pray on this day that they should be zocha to a beautiful esrog, coming sukkos. That it's mesugal for esrogim. Now, admittedly, I will say, although because of Shemitah, actually, that is a little complicated. But you know, you have to remember that in Europe, getting a kosher, not now, but I mean, in 100 years ago, getting a kosher esrog was a very, very difficult thing. In fact, it was very common in many communities that maybe there was only one esrog in the whole city. Like the Rav got an esrog, or the Rebbe got an esrog, and everybody would line up to say a bracha on the Rebbe's esrog. Nobody could afford it. Nobody could get. You're living in Poland. You couldn't get an esrog. Esrogs don't grow in Poland, that's for sure. Like what did they say? That's about a chicken. What did they say? That's not. It's a similar joke that if somebody was eating chicken soup during the week, either they were sick or the chicken was sick. One or the other. But by an orange, they have a similar. I don't remember the exact word, but by an orange, they have the similar joke that if somebody's eating an orange, either they're sick or the orange is pretty rotten. The orange is pretty sick, or whatever it is. These fruits, we're so used to having fruits all the time that we don't realize that they were scarce, that they were very hard to get, and esrog people didn't have. Really, people sometimes save up their life savings to buy an esrog. In fact, there's a whole story, a beautiful story about a person.
It only lasts for 1 year.
Only lasts for 1 year, for 1 week. Not that's 1 year. In fact, they have a beautiful old story about. It's a sad story too, about a very poor man and his wife. They decided their dream in life was to get an esrog, get a beautiful esrog, and they were so poor. So he would save, like the kopecks, he would save little pennies from here and there. And he saved for like 10, 20 years. And he goes to the esrog merchant. And the esrog merchant said, not enough money. Not enough. So a few more years, he brings it. He finally has enough money for a beautiful, beautiful esrog. And he, tells his wife. And apparently, he sold everything. He sold their house. They were in the street. It was everything was gone for this esrog. So she was very upset, understandably so, because they had children. They had children they had to marry off. And she said, how can you do such a thing? You destroyed our life. I mean, you could be Yotzei the mitzvah with the Rav's esrog. So the story goes, I mean, it's not such a nice part of the story, that she took the esrog and she threw it against the wall. Just, it was a moment that she lost control because she saw that he just destroyed everything. So he said, again, this is not such a positive woman story, but he said, Hashem, I gave away all, I have no money, I have no home, I have no esrog, but I'm not going to let my shalom bayis be taken away, too. So he forgave her, and then she was happy with what he did, and they lived happily ever after in their poverty. But this is, yeah. But I mean, it's the fact that she did it. But again, you can understand her her frustration. That's the nature of things. That sometimes a person loses it. We have to try to control, but sometimes it's very, very difficult. Yeah.
Is that halakhically even acceptable for him to do that, considering that he's responsible for making sure she has a roof over her head to a certain degree? And
the truth of the matter is, if he would have asked a Rav or a Posek, should he do it, the Posek for sure would say he should not have done it. He should not have done it. This is an example of what Chazal say, that sometimes love can distort a person's judgment. This is a statement in the Gemara. A person has a love for Hashem and a love for a mitzvah, and that's a wonderful, wonderful thing. But if it's not balanced with the sense of judgment and gevura, the love can be like a fire, right? It's a fire that's out of control. And a fire that's out of control can also destroy. So you are correct. Halachically, it was not the right thing, but his motives were so pure. That's something, Okay, so the Tu B'Shvat Seder is based on these ideas, but the way it's done is very, very interesting. First, there's a concept of 4 cups of wine are drunk at various points in the Seder. And of course, that's obviously a parallel to the Pesach Seder. But here, the Chemdas Hayamim writes, this is a little Kabbalistic, that the 4 cups of wine are keneged the 4 worlds. Again, I'm not sure how much you've gone into this. Have you learned about the 4 spiritual worlds? The world of Atzilus, which is the world of pure emanation, which is Elokus, that's pure godliness that comes from God. And then it gets more and more physical, the world of Bria, creation, the world of Yetzira, the world of formation, and then our physical world, which is called the world of Asiya. So in other words, Atzilus is the highest spiritual level. But then it comes down into the world of Asiya, right? So the way it works is this. In the 4 cups, we're trying to pull spiritual powers from the world of Atzilus down to the physical world of Asiya. So the first cup is our connection to Atzilus. The second cup is pulling it down to Bria. The third cup is pulling it down to Yetzira. The 4th cup is pulling it down to Asiya. Now, based on this, the way the composition of the wine changes. The first cup is pure white wine. The second cup adds a little red to the white. The third cup is half red, half white. And the 4th cup is mostly red, but you add a little white. Of course, adding white to red, you're not going to see anything. But there is red, there is white that's within the red wine. And the way it works is this: white is the color of mercy, rachamim, and red is the color of judgment and din. In Atzilus, which is the root of all of the worlds, everything is rachamim. The differentiation that we perceive between kindness and judgment, between chesed and gevura, is only a perception that we have on the lower level, where sometimes I see God's mercy and sometimes I see God's punishment. That's how I perceive things and the lower levels of the world. But if you go to the ultimate root of even the Gevuras, the Gevura, it is ultimately Chesed. So in the world of Atzilus, the wine is white, so to speak, because the root of everything is Hashem's Rachamim, Hashem's Chesed, Hashem's love, Hashem's compassion. Even the Gevura is there really as an act of love to give us direction, give us kapara, encourage us to do tshuva. And then, as you get progressively lower and lower, the chesed is still there, but it gets concealed by the gevuros. And that's why even in the last cup, you still have the white wine, even though it seems to be enveloped by red, you see? So that's the idea of the 4 cups in which you're trying to be moshech, you're trying to bring down divine shefa, divine beneficence, divine influences from the world of Atzilus down to the world of Asiya, which is our world. And yes, godliness becomes more and more concealed as you go into the lower worlds. That's exactly the point. There is progressively greater levels of concealment, but it's still there. It's there, but concealed. It's not that there's less, right? This is the Alter Rebbe makes this point many times. It's not that there's less Elokus in Asiya than there is in Atzilus. You can't talk about quantity anyway, but the same godliness that's in the highest worlds is in the lowest worlds. And the only difference is the degree of concealment and hiding. So that's the 4 cups. Now, interestingly enough, with each cup, just like with the Seder, right? With each cup you do something. Like with the first cup for the Seder, you say Kiddush, right? So there is something you do with each cup, and that is we eat fruits with each cup, and I'll talk about the order of the fruits in a moment. And what you do is, if you have the Seder, not everybody has the Seder, you recite some psukim or some Gemara or some Mishnah or some Zohar about that particular fruit. So and there are svarim that give you this. When you're eating olives, you talk about the olive psukim. When you're eating grapes, you talk about the grape psukim, etc. Okay? So the concept is you talk about the unique quality of those particular fruits. So there are 3 different arrangements of fruit eating in a Tu B'Shvat Seder, and it's not, different people do different things, and it's not clear, there's not a unified minhag. Some emphasize the 7 species of Eretz Yisrael, the Shivas Haminim. So they would go with 7 fruits, although they're not really all fruits. Let's be sure we know the Shivas Haminim. The Shivas Haminim are what? Wheat, chita, barley. Geffen is grapes or wine. Te'ena is fig. Rimon is pomegranate. Zeit shemen is olives. And devash, which is honey, does not mean bee honey, but devash is date. Date. Bee honey is not one of the 7 species. It's kosher, even though the Gemara has to go through a lot of reasons why is bee honey kosher. It comes from bees, but okay. But bee honey is kosher, but it's not one of the 7 species. When it mentions devash in the Torah, it refers to date honey.
Why is it kosher? Why is bee honey kosher?
Well, the Gemara discusses that logically it would not be kosher, but ultimately it says that it's not really from the bee. What happens is the bee sucks up nectar,
Right.
and it gets a little solidified through processes in the bee's body, and then it excretes the nectar, or spits it out, or whatever the mechanism is, and therefore it is not considered as coming from the bee. The bee is really just ingesting the nectar and then expelling it. But that's why some things are different. For example, you have to be very careful about bee products. There are other products from bees besides honey. There is something called royal jelly. If you look at it, that refers on, it's the same process. When the bee takes in nectar, it manufactures a lot of stuff, and the royal jelly has kind of more of the bee in it, so to speak. And royal jelly is extraordinarily healthy. It's one of those things that is one of these miracle foods that you eat and the like. But many poskim say royal jelly is treif. It's not.
Why? Because it has
Huh?
from the bee in it?
It's like bee pollen. There's stuff from the bee in it, but it's not that. I mean, not that it doesn't have physical pieces of bee. I mean that it doesn't have, but it's so much part of what the bee produces. Because the bee's body has much more of a function in terms of producing it than it is the case with honey. Okay. By the way, I don't know if you realize how important bees are. Without bees, you basically don't have flowers, you don't have you don't have trees, you don't have quite a lot of things. And over the past 10 years, there has been an unexplainable shortage of bees. A lot of bees are dying, and for some reason, there's a shortage of bees. That can actually endanger the whole agricultural cycle. It's a very, very serious thing when you don't have bees. But okay. All right. So one approach of the Tu B'Shvat Seder is the Achilas Peiros are the 7 species. Now, here we do have a very interesting issue about the 7 species. Let me mention an interesting halachic issue. If I have 7 types of fruit in front of me, which order do I eat them in? Which bracha do I make first? So the interesting rule is that you make the bracha based on the order that they are in the pasuk, subject to one exception. Let's put aside wheat and barley, because wheat and barley is a little different, because wheat and barley have a different bracha. Wheat and barley, the bracha is borei minei mizonos. All the other fruits are borei pri ha'etz. So I'm going to put aside wheat and barley for a moment and simply ask this question. Let's assume I have olives, grapes, figs, pomegranates, and dates in front of me. I'm going to eat from all of them. But I only have to make one bracha, borei pri ha'etz, right? Once you make a bracha on one fruit, that covers all the other fruits. So which fruit, this is even during the year, which fruit should you make your bracha on when you have the Shiva Saminim? Well, first of all, let me make an obvious point. If you have Shiva Saminim and not Shiva Saminim, let's say I have grapes and an apple, and I'm going to eat both. If I'm only going to eat one, then I only, I don't have. If I only want an apple, I don't have to make a bracha on the grape. That's fine. But assuming I'm going to eat grapes and an apple, the halacha is I should make the bracha on the grape and cover the apple, rather than make a bracha on the apple and cover the grape. Because since a grape is one of the 7 species of Eretz Yisrael, you have to honor it. You have to give it a greater chashivas. So that's obvious. Grape, and apple, you make the borei pri ha'etz on the grape, unless you don't want to eat the grape, then you make it on the apple.
Or is there also an exception, like you're supposed to say a bracha on the fruit that's whole? So if the grape is cut up and the apple is full? Yes,
that's a very good question. All these things are discussed. What if you have a question with priority rules? But we say Shiva Saminim even beats out wholeness. Now, what if I have grapes and a date? Meaning, what if my 2 fruits are both of the Shiva Saminim? So which one do I make the bracha on? So the answer is the one that is earlier in the verse. But there's a big exception to that. So, if I have, let's say olive, right? Zeit Shemen is number 3 in the pasuk. Eretz Chita Saora. I'm sorry. Chita Saora. Geffen, yeah. Geffen is number 3 in the pasuk. Geffen is grapes, right? So if I have grapes and a fig, since grapes is number 3 and fig is number 4, you make the bracha on the grape, and that covers the fig, rather than make the bracha on the fig and cover the grape. But here is the trick. And actually, maybe we should write down. Yeah, why don't we write down the whole pasuk if you're willing to Write it down.
Can I erase this?
Yeah. Yeah, this is something that if you see it in writing, you'll understand it more. Eretz, Chita, Saora. Yeah, I think it's without Yidden as well. Yeah, that's right. Saora, Geffen, Te'ena.
Tough, right?
Te'ena with an aleph. Verimon. Yeah. Eretz. Thank you. Zait. Shemen. Udavash. Excellent. Now, do me a favor and circle the word Eretz the first time and circle the word Eretz the second time. Okay, yeah, then you want to translate, that's fine. Wheat, barley.
Like that?
Uh-huh. Right. Grape.
Fig?
Fig. Pomegranate. That's a hard one to spell. P-O-M-E.
Granice.
Granite. Granite. Yeah. Yeah, more or less, yeah. I think A-T, right. Olive. Yeah, Shemen is the same thing. Olive, yeah. And date honey. Okay. So, you'll notice that the word Eretz, land, appears twice in the pasuk. So, priority is not necessarily based on the order in the pasuk, but on its proximity to the word Eretz, which means the following. If I have an olive and I have a grape, let's look at it. Olives and grapes, although that doesn't sound like much an appetizing combination necessarily, right? Now, a grape is number 3 from the first Eretz, and the olive is number 6 in the pasuk, but it's number 1 from the second Eretz. So even though grape is number 3 and olive is number 6, olive beats out grape because olive is number 1 from the second Eretz and grape is number 3 from the first Eretz. You see? Get it? Same thing with dates. If you have even dates and grape, dates beat out the grape because date is number 2 from the second Eretz, and grape is number 3 from the first Eretz. Now, if you have, okay, I mean, that's kind of how you do it. In other words, proximity to Eretz wins, but we don't look at the list from 1 to 7, rather we look at the list from first Eretz and second Eretz.
What if you have an olive and some wheat?
Okay, so if you have olive and wheat, so, all right, that's a very good question. Logically, based on what I just said, the olive would beat out the wheat. I'm sorry. Wheat beats out olive for sure. The reason wheat beats out olive for sure is when both of them are in position 1, the first Eretz wins. So wheat is in the number 1 position to the first Eretz, and Zayit is in the number 1 position to the second Eretz. Now the question is, what about barley and olive? Because barley is position 2 and olive is position 1, but then you'd have a different problem really, because the truth of the matter is, the bracha for wheat and barley is mizonos anyway. So right. Mizonos is always before any fruit. So in a sense, therefore, when I'm eating wheat or barley, that's always going to be number 1. Not because of the Shivas Aminim, but because mizonos is made before ha'etz.
And
yeah.
Does it matter when you're deciding which fruit to make the bracha on, if it's a fresh fruit or a dry fruit?
For this purposes, no. Now, I just want to point out that now this is something people make a mistake. Sometimes people think they got to follow this order for everything. No, this order just tells you which bracha you recite the ha'etz on. So, if, for example, I have all of these fruits, so it turns out, putting aside the wheat and the barley, which is mizonos, it turns out that the order would be olive, which is number 1 from the second eretz, and then Devash, which is number 2 from the second eretz, and then Gefen, Ta'ina, Verimo. Right? You see the order? But that just determines which one gets the honor of the bracha. Once you've made the bracha on the one you've chosen, you can eat the other fruits in any order you want. Okay? This is not a continuing obligation for how you eat the fruits. So if I only have 2 fruits, I decide which one to make the bracha on. But once I make the bracha, that's going to cover me for everything. So then I could eat the fruits in any order I want. Okay? So that's the Seder based on the Shivas Haminim. And as I say, there are Svarim that give you psukim and teachings. Now, so that's based on 7, wheat, barley, etc. Now, there is another arrangement that eats 12 different types of fruits. And they overlap with the Shivas Haminim, but they add other things. And the reason for that is Kabbalistic. And I'll just tell you what the reason is without fully explaining it. And that is Yud Kei Vav Kei, Hashem's 4-letter name that we don't pronounce. The Yud and the Hey and the Vav and the Hey. That can be arranged in 12 different combinations. In fact, every month there's a different, what's called siruf, a different combination of the Yud Kei Vav Kei. That's mashpi on that month, a different divine power that comes into the month. So the Mekubalim correlate certain fruits with different spellings of Hashem's name. And therefore you eat the 12 fruits with the kavana to be moshech, to pull into the world the koach of those different arrangements of Hashem's name. Right, so that would be, right, so we have the 7 species Seder, we have the 12 species Seder, based on what are called serufim. Serufim are combinations of the Shem Havaya. And they even have a remez, and I'm going to tell you a little bit of a complicated gematria, in the word Elon. Spell the word Elon. Elon is Aleph, Yud, Lamed, Nun. Now, do you know that in Hebrew, in Kabbalah, a word can be expanded with what is called miloi. What do we mean by miloi? Let's take the letter Yud. You can spell out Yud. Yud, Vav, Dalet. And for calculating gematria, the Mekubalim sometimes use miloi and do a gematria of the miloi. So, for example, the gematria of Elon as a plain gematria is what? Aleph is 1. Yud is 10, that's 11. Lamed is 30, that's 41. And Nun is 50, so that's 91. The gematria of Elon, plain, is 91. But if you spell out Elon, you get a much bigger gematria. Maybe you want to help me write it again? I'll tell you how to spell it. Aleph is spelled Aleph is Aleph, Lamed. Okay, that's it. Aleph, Lamed, Pei. It's final Pei. Aleph. That's Aleph. Now Yud, do under it. Yud is Yud, Vav, Dalet. Lamed is Lamed, Mem, Dalet. And Nun is Nun, Vav, Nun. Right? That's called Miloi. You see the concept? What you're doing is you're spelling out every letter. So now let's look at the gematria of Elon b'Miloi. Aleph is Aleph Lamed is 31 and 80 is what? 111. Is that right? 31 and 80 is 111. Yud is 20. Yud is 20 under that. Lamed is 74. And Nun is 106. So let's add up those numbers. 111 and 20 is 131. 131 and 70 is 201. And 4 is 205. 205 is 311. Okay, the gematria of Elon B'Miloi is 311. Now, if you take the Shem Havaya, Yud Kei Vav Kei, the gematria is 26. Yud Kei Vav Kei. Multiply 26 by 12. 26 times 12 should be 312. That's what it should come out. 26 times 12. And by gematria, you can ignore a discrepancy of 1. That's a rule of gematria. So the rule is that Elon B'Miloi equals 12 times the Shem Havaya. And that's why they eat 12 fruits on the Rosh Hashanah Le'Elon to bring down the divine influence of the Shem Havaya. Again, I don't want to go into too much, but just to get a sense of how everything is significant. Fine. Yeah. I'm sorry.
12 fruits.
Huh?
12 fruits according to...
That's 12 fruits, according to the second opinion. Then we come to the Shita of Rav Chaim Vital, who was the great, Rav Chaim Vital was the great Talmud of the Ari, where he says, this is amazing, you eat 30 fruits, 30 fruits on Tu B'Shvat. Now, I always say that Tu B'Shvat is a very important day for boys in yeshiva because it might be the only day a year they eat fruit. Women tend to be more conscientious about fruits and vegetables than the men, so they have to have one day a year where they have to eat fruit. But where does Rav Chaim Vital get 30? So this goes back to the following idea. This is connected to a theme about the 4 cups. He says, 10 of the fruits should have inedible peels, but edible insides. Example, banana, orange, pomegranate, right? Inedible peel, edible on the inside. Nuts, that's correct, nuts. So we'll call that category 1. Category 2 are the opposite. The fruit is totally edible on the outside, but it has a pit in the middle that you can't eat. That would be a peach,
Cherry.
an apricot, a cherry, an avocado.
Sir.
An avocado. Category 3 are the fruits that you can eat the whole thing, except for maybe very small seeds that don't really count. An example would be an apple, grapes, right? Most of the time you can just chew the grapes. So you have 10 representatives of these 3 categories of fruits. Now, what do they represent? Why do we have these 3? This is Rav Chaim Vital. Why do we have these 3 categories of fruit? So he says the following. The fruits represent a spiritual energy that Hashem put into these fruits. And different types of fruits emanate from different types of worlds. He says, this world is the world of Asiya. And the world of Asiya, the divinity is concealed in a klipa. Quite literally, what does the word klipa even mean? The word klipa means a peel, a barrier. So the lowest level of fruits, so to speak, represent a fruit in which the holiness, the goodness of it, the nurturance of it is blocked, is concealed, unless you break it. So therefore, the nuts and the oranges, actually I shouldn't count, avocados are actually, they get hit on both sides. They have inedible outside and inside. So an avocado would actually be the type 1 fruit, represents the world of Asiya, where the holiness and goodness of the fruit is concealed in a klipa. The second, and the reason it's 10 is because every world has 10 spheros. There are 10 spheros in every one of the worlds. The second category represents a higher spiritual level in which there's still a concealment, there's still a klipa, but the holiness is so strong that it breaks through. So it leaves the pit in the middle. So there's still a blockage there, but it's surrounded by the holiness that breaks out, and that represents the higher world of Yetzirah. And then the holiest is the one in which the Kedusha totally breaks away from any barrier, and that is the world of Berea. Now, one second though. But what about the world of Atzilus, right? You'll notice that these three categories of fruits are Asiya, Yetzirah, Berea. What about Atzilus? Atzilus, because it's pure Elokuts, there is no physicality at all. So there's no concept of concretization in the physical. And that's why some say for Atzilus, you use smell. You get spices that you smell because that's a purely spiritual sensation. So, very, very complicated, right? How do you integrate all of this? It's not at all clear. We have the 4 cups of wine, which are the 4 worlds. We have the Shiva Saminim. We have the 12 fruit Seder. We have the 30 fruit Seder. And the 30 fruit Seder is also connected to Bria, Yetzirah, Asiya, right? Bringing down the holiness. And then Atzilus is connected to Reach, right? So there are many, many different associations. And, most of us, including myself, we don't really understand all of these different inyanim. But the one thing is that there is indeed a mitzvah to eat the fruits of Eretz Yisrael on Tu B'Shvat. That much for sure there is.
Mitzvah?
Well, it's not, it's not, the Shulchan Aruch doesn't say it, but the Mishnah Berurah says it. The commentaries on the Shulchan Aruch absolutely said, and the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch brings it down. So it is a minhag Yisrael that's very, very proper. So even if, we don't know all the Kabbalistic intentions, it is an important thing to do. It's a beautiful way of feeling grateful to Hashem for all of the chesed that He has given us. So now I want to talk about a halachic aspect, which Tu B'Shvat is very important to, but this has really nothing to do with Tu B'Shvat per se, but it's the halachic implication of Tu B'Shvat, which is very, very fascinating. And you're not going to be celebrating that per se, but it's a halacha that those of you that have trees or want to own trees at some point in your life need to be aware of. And that is, there is a law in the Torah called Orla. Orla means when you plant a tree, the first 3 years after a tree is planted, any fruit that grows during the first 3 years is forbidden to eat. An Isser D'Oraisa, to eat the fruit of the first 3 years. By the way, people misunderstand that. Sometimes people think, I can't eat the fruit for 3 years, but after 3 years I could eat the fruit. Anything that is Orla is forbidden forever. Right? The fruit that grows during the first 3 years can never be eaten. It doesn't go off after 3 years. The fruit that grows after 3 years, that can be eaten. Now, what is unique about Orla is that Orla is one of the few agricultural prohibitions that even apply outside of Israel. So the Isser of Orla is not only for the fruit of Eretz Yisrael. The Isser of Orla is even for the fruit of Chutz La'aretz. But there's a very big difference. And that is, in Eretz Yisrael, even if you're in doubt, if I don't know if something is Orla or not, I'm not allowed to eat it. Safek, if something is a doubtful prohibition of a Torah law, I got to be strict. But Safek Orla in Chutz La'aretz is mutter, which means to say that's why I can go into a store in America and I can buy an apple. How can I buy an apple? Maybe it's Orla. Yeah, the answer is, maybe it's Orla. But if I don't know, the halacha says I'm allowed to be lenient. In Eretz Yisrael, I would have to know. That is why any hashgacha, you don't have to know yourself, but that if you're buying fruits under supervision, hashgacha, part of the hashgacha is to determine that the fruit is not Orla. If you don't have a hashgacha on Orla, you're not allowed to buy the fruit. In Chutz La'aretz, I can buy the fruit because in Chutz La'aretz, Orla is forbidden only if you know that it's Orla It is not prohibited if you are in Suffolk, if it's Orla, yeah.
So is Orla Chutz La'aretz Derabbanan?
It is the Araisa, but it's a halacha l'Moshe Misinai. It was an oral law given to Moshe, and part of the oral law included a heter that misafek it is permitted. So it's a deviation. It's an exception from the normal rule. Even though it's a subject to Araisa, the Torah permits you to be lenient in this type of suffix. Okay, this is the law of Orla. Yeah.
So let's say that since you don't have you can be lenient. You can assume that the fruit is not from a third year, second year tree, etc. In Chutz La'aretz. But let's say that you're at an apple orchard and you're going apple picking. Do you have responsibility to ask them about this?
In Chutz La'aretz?
Yeah.
No, you're not. You're not. Even if you're harvesting and you're not buying it in the store, you don't have a problem. The problem would essentially the problem would only be in your own orchard where you know.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Now, the other thing about Orla that is very, very complicated, very important to know, is that the Orla clock can be reset every time the tree is moved or replanted. Now, here is the thing you need to know. Very, very few people plant a tree from a seed. Like Johnny Appleseed view. They don't take a seed and put it in the ground and get a tree. That takes a pretty long time. So what do? We buy trees, saplings, from nurseries. We go to, both in Israel and in Chutz La'aretz, we go to a nursery and we buy a tree. Now, you might think, if you didn't know the halacha, as long as the tree is more than 3 years old, I'm safe, and I don't have an Orla problem. Not necessarily. Because when you buy a tree in a nursery and you replant it in your backyard, that's a new planting. And you may have an Orla problem for the next 3 years. Now, this depends. If, when you bought it, there was a ball of soil attached, right? Normally, when the saplings have a lot of soil on them, so the roots were not uprooted from that soil. So then it depends if the soil could keep the tree alive for around a month without replanting, then you don't have to start Orla again. But if it's only a little bit of soil and it couldn't really keep the tree alive for that long, Orla starts again. So this is a very important point, that when you get a sapling and you're transplanting the sapling, there may be an Orla problem even if the tree is 10 years old. Okay, that's one thing to keep in mind. Okay. And that's probably why for the home gardener that would be the most serious Orla problem, in which when you get something from a nursery, you may have to start the Orla rules, the Orla time periods over again.
Is the halacha against fruits that grew, the third year of fruits growing, or just the third year since the tree was planted?
No, that's a very important point. It is not the third year of fruits growing. It is the third year of the tree planted. So, for example, if a tree did not produce fruit for 3 years, and that sometimes happens, it's not Orla. There's no Orla at all because you had no fruits for those first 3 years. So Orla does not depend on there being fruits. It just depends on 3 years from the planting. Okay. But here is the thing you need to know. This is also very, very interesting, that the 3 years don't have to be complete. And that is the way you compute it. I'll give you an example. You'll see exactly from this example. I'm going to first give you the law, and then I'll explain the halacha. The rule is, if you plant a fruit tree on or before the 15th of Av, not Tu B'Shvat, the 15th of Av, which is towards the end of the summer, the 15th of Av, which is only 45 days before Rosh Hashanah, when Tishrei comes, that counts for a whole year. And then the second year is Tishrei to Tishrei, and the third year is Tishrei to Tishrei, and then you just have to wait until Tu B'Shvat. Let's take a particular example. Let's imagine I planted a fruit tree on the 14th of Av, before the 15th of Av, on the 14th of Av of 57, let's say 78. Okay, remember the numbers, or I may forget them.
Wait,
Yeah, let's go with exactly. That's I appreciate it. Thank you.
so what do you say 15th of Av?
Yeah, 15th of Av, or before. 5778. That's the year. So, Rosh Hashanah of 5779, I've completed year 1. So
But even though it's only been like 2 months.
Yeah, only 2 months. Right. So Rosh Hashanah of 5779, finished year 1. Rosh Hashanah 5780. Year 2. Rosh Hashanah 5781. I finished year 3. I'm sorry. Year 3. But I do have to wait until Tu B'Shvat, which means to say Tu B'Shvat of 5781. The fruit from that point onwards is no longer Orla. So how long have I really waited, really? Only 2 months, 2 months, a year, and around 5 months. So really, it's only 2 years and 7 months in a case like that, right? You really haven't waited 7 years. Now, that's only if you planted it on the 15th of Av or before. Let me just give you one more example. What if you planted it the 16th of Av? So here, it's very tricky. You don't get the benefit of the partial year. And your year does not start until Tishrei of 5779. And you have to have a year to 5780, and a year to 5781, and a year to 5782.
Why is that the cutoff?
So I'll explain that in a moment. So first I want you to see the difference between planting it on the 15th of Av and planting it on the 16th of Av. If you plant it on the 16th of Av, you literally have to wait until Rosh Hashanah of 5782. If you planted it on the 15th of Av or earlier, you have Tu B'Shvat of 5781. Now, the difference is the following. The difference is that in order to get the benefit of a short year, that short year, there are 2 conditions. Condition number 1 is it must have been planted for at least 30 days. 30 days. But number 2, a tree is not considered firmly planted until it's been in the ground for 2 weeks. Because it takes 2 weeks for the root structure to take hold. So consequently, if I need 30 days of planting for the year to count, and I need 2 weeks for the root system to take into the ground, so 2 weeks is 14 days plus 30 is 44 days. So I need 44 days in the old year to count as a year, and it happens to be the 15th of Av, happens to be 44 days before Rosh Hashanah. Masha Enkin, if I plant it after the 15th of Av, I'm not going to have 30 days of a planted tree in that year. Okay? So this is a very important aspect of Tu B'Shvat, that Tu B'Shvat determines, in cases where I planted on the 15th of Av or earlier, Tu B'Shvat determines when the Isra of Orla goes off. Now, one other point, I just want to clarify something. What defines a fruit as Orla or not Orla is not when it ripened, it's when it budded. This is important. What is budding? If you know, most fruit trees produce a flower, like say an apple tree, a cherry tree. In fact, I'm from the Washington, D.C. area, so every year there's a famous cherry blossom festival, and cherry trees blossom, right? During Nisan, there's even a bracha that we recite when we see trees in blossom, right? There's a bracha. You try to see a fruit tree blossoming. So what happens is a fruit tree produces a flower, and then the flower falls off, and then you have a little bud. The sap produces a bud, and that bud becomes the fruit. Now, the bud is not the ripening of the fruit, it's the very beginning of the fruit. I call it chanata in Hebrew. Chanata is budding. So orla is defined by chanata, not complete ripening. So by that I mean, once you've defined your orla period, any fruit that had its budding within that orla period is going to be orla. So for example, in the case where you planted on the 15th of Av, and the fruit is orla until 2 Bishvat of 5781, right? That means any fruit that budded before 2 Bishvat of 5781 is orla. Any fruit that budded after 2 Bishvat of 5781 is not orla. So we don't care when it was harvested, and we don't care when it even ripened. We are looking to when it budded. Now this creates interesting issues about Shemitah. Let me explain the intersection here. Because Shemitah, all of the fruit that grows during Shemitah is hefker. Now, normally, if I have a vineyard, I have an orchard that has orla in it, I don't have to put up a sign that it's orla. Because who am I protecting? Thieves? In other words, I don't have to say, oh, you can't steal my fruit because it's orla. You're not supposed to steal my fruit at all. But on Shemitah, I got to put up a sign. Because on Shemitah, everyone's allowed to come in and take it. So if I have an apple tree, you're allowed to come in and take it. But if I have an orla apple tree, you're not allowed to eat it. So I am chayav during Shemitah to put a sign on my orla trees that you cannot take it. I don't have to give you that warning the rest of the years. But on Shemitah, I have to give you that particular warning. Okay?
What do you do with the orla fruit?
So that's an interesting point. It's a very interesting question. The Gemara seems to say you're supposed to burn it. But Lamaisa, we don't do that. In fact, it's even a kasha the Mefarshim ask. We throw it into the garbage, basically. It's not holy. It's just not supposed to be eaten. In fact, you're not even supposed to feed it to your animals because that's getting benefit from it. And you're not supposed to get benefit from orla.
You can't compost it either.
Right, you can't compost it. That's correct. That's getting benefit. Yeah.
Two things. First thing is, it would be pretty smart to get your tree to have orla while Shemitah year so that you can wait out that year.
Well, okay, that would be fine. Of course, you wouldn't be allowed to lie. You couldn't put on a non-orla tree that it's...
No, you would get your trees on purpose
Right.
so that they
Okay.
can be in orla. That was the first thing. The second thing is, why do we even, why is orla even a thing? Is it for the tree?
It's hard to know. I mean, some simply say that generally speaking, the first 3 years of growth, the fruit is inferior and it would be healthier to let the tree get into a better reproductive cycle. But that's a very difficult reason because, that should be my choice. Why does the Torah care if I eat a less healthy fruit or whatever it would be? I don't know. We don't really have a good reason. But I will tell you this. Orla is the source of another, which is only a minhag Yisrael, not a din, but it's a minhag that's widely followed, and it's based on Orla, and that is the minhag of upsharing. That's right, correct. The idea that we don't give a boy his first haircut till he's 3 years old, and that's when we give him a yarmulke, and that's when we give him tzitzis. The concept is that just as the Torah says that the fruit of the first 3 years is kind of wild, it cannot be directed, it cannot yet be elevated for holiness. So there's a recognition that going back to the idea that a human is like a tree, and maybe that's the reason for all the kind of a remez, that until a child is 3, he's not yet ready to really be guided and directed. And once he's 3, now we're ready to be able to give him chinuch and the like. So the source of upsharing, again, it's not a chiyuv. If you wanted to give your child a haircut before 3, it's not forbidden to do it. But it's a widespread minhag that people delay the haircut until 3, and it's based on the idea of orla and the like. And apparently it's an important enough minhag, even though it's only a minhag, that we even allow it on Chol HaMoed, which is actually very unusual. Chol HaMoed is normally very strict that you're not allowed to get haircuts on Chol HaMoed. And yet, this is considered to be enough of a mitzvah that if the child's third birthday is on Chol HaMoed, we permit the haircut even on Chol HaMoed. Huh?
The 9 days.
9 days, Omer, yeah, 3 weeks.
That's a good question. I have to check. I believe we matter it. I believe it's a kal v'chomer, to tell you the truth. I mean, logically, if we permit getting a haircut during Chol HaMoed, which is forbidden in the Mishnah, then all those other periods, which are later than the Mishnah, they're not in the Gemara even, I think for sure we would permit it. So I would imagine that even during the 9 days.
You're allowed.
Yes.
Interesting.
I can't imagine that we would be more lenient for Chol HaMoed. Chol HaMoed is very strict. The two halachos of Chol HaMoed that are very strict, and a lot of people take it too lightly, is doing laundry and getting haircuts. Are very, very strict.
When you say Chol HaMoed,
Yeah,
you literally mean any holiday that has a Chol HaMoed?
that's correct. Yeah.
Oh, that's crazy.
Well, there are only 2 holidays that have Chol HaMoed.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Pesach and Sukkot. They're the only two. Shavuos doesn't have a Chol HaMoed.
Right.
But Chol HaMoed are very, very strict regarding laundry, and everyone always has the perennial question, I've run out of clothes and this and that. It's a big, big problem. The truth is, many poskim say it is much better to buy new clothes during Chol HaMoed than to launder, the clothing that you
And
have.
why can't you do laundry?
So these are rabbinic enactments, but they're strict. The rabbis were afraid that if you would be given the ability to wash your clothes during Chol HaMoed, you would not bother to prepare enough clothes from before the holiday. Same thing with haircuts. You're not going to bother to get a haircut or whatever because you can do it during Chol HaMoed. And they wanted you to maximize your preparations for Yom Tov before the Yom Tov. So they basically said, if you're not conscientious enough to take care of these things before Yom Tov, we're not going to let you fix it
Right.
on
Isn't
Yom
there an
Tov itself.
exception of like a specific case where you could?
Yeah, there are many exceptions. Sure. There are many, many exceptions. For example, children's clothing you can wash. Because children's clothing who play in the mud, even if you cleaned it before Yom Tov, it would get dirty. So children's clothing
How
can
about
be
for
washed. Haircuts, the exceptions there are far and few between. I mean, there may be some unusual situations that if you were in mourning, you were in Avelos, and you weren't allowed to cut your hair till Chol HaMoed. So we might allow you to do it. That would be a question of Avelos. Or you were in prison. I mean, the Mishnah gives cases you were in prison, you were on a ship, whatever it would be. But in the normal course, now there is among the modern Orthodox, there is a shita like this. There is an opinion that says that any person who shaves on a daily basis, if he shaves every day, could shave on Chol HaMoed. A man. So that there is such a view, but most do not agree with
What
that.
if they shave every 2 days?
Yeah, so it seems it has to be every day, etc., every day, and the like. Yeah.
What about if someone, back to Sarah, if someone planted on, let's say the 17th of Av or whatever,
Yeah.
could he just wait till Rosh Hashanah 5782, and or does he have to wait till Tu B'Shvat of 5782?
So excellent. I'm glad you brought it up. He does not have to wait to Tu B'Shvat. That's the important difference, because you see the difference. When you plant after the 15th of Av, your Orla period is not over until more than 3 years have already passed. 5782. Right? When I planted, let's say the 16th of Av, 5778, so all of 5779 is 1 year, all of 5780 is 1 year, and all of 5781. So by the time it's Rosh Hashanah 5782, I already have 3 complete years. When I have 3 complete years, I don't have to wait to Tu B'Shvat. See the difference? I only have to wait to Tu B'Shvat when on the Rosh Hashanah before I didn't have 3 complete years. That's the
Why
idea.
specifically Tu B'Shvat? Just 'cause
So once again, because Tu B'Shvat, that's actually the non-Kabbalistic meaning, that Tu B'Shvat is the new year of the trees, meaning it ends the Orla period. So some of these have non-Kabbalistic meanings. It simply means for Orla purposes, it is the end of the Orla cycle. And the reason is because for tree growth, it's the time of a new sap. New sap comes up, so it's like the end of the old tree year and the beginning of the new tree year. Okay? So that's Orla. So as I say, that tends not to be discussed at Tu B'Shvat Seders because it's a very technical point, but it's an interesting aspect of Rosh Hashanah for Ilanot. It's the new year for trees. But as I say, Orla is something you need to be aware of if you are a gardener. Now keep in mind, Orla only applies to trees. It does not apply to vegetables
What about fruit
or
bushes?
grain. So what about?
Fruit bushes, like raspberries?
So then you get a real question. No, these are big shilas. So then the question becomes, what's called a tree? What if you have blueberries, for example, things that grow on bushes? Now,
Strawberries practically grow.
strawberries, right. So in some ways, this is similar to the question, do I make a borei pri ha'etz or borei pri ha'adama, right? We have this perennial question on bush fruits. Do you make ha'etz? Is it a tree? Now, that's an important question, not only for the bracha, which is maybe the way you've normally studied it. It's also a question whether the laws of Orla apply. And so indeed, for blueberries, the laws of Orla do apply. For bananas, they do not apply, because although bananas do grow on a tree, but again, it doesn't have branches, etc.
We see eggs, blueberries.
Yes, you do. You make ha'etz on blueberries. That's correct. Strawberries, you make ha'adama because they're so close to the ground, right? So this issue. So when you study the laws of brachos, when do you make ha'etz? When do you make ha'adama? Keep in mind, it's also going to be relevant with respect to Orla, right? A lot of things. Papayas, it's not so pasha. There's a lot of different things in which there's different opinions. Does Orla apply to them or not? Now, again, as I say, when you buy anything under hashgacha in Eretz Yisrael, and fruits and vegetables, you have to have reliable hashgacha because of truma and maser and everything else. So you don't have to worry about it. I mean, if the hashgacha is reliable, they have factored this in for you. So it's not something, I hope I'm not going to make you worry, it's not something you have to independently worry about. And in Chutz La'aretz, you don't have to worry about it, because if it's a safek in Chutz La'aretz, you're allowed to be lenient. So for all practical purposes, the issue of Orla is only going to be relevant in your own garden when you're aware of when the tree was planted or replanted. Okay, so that's kind of some background on Tu B'Shvat. Anyway, wish you all happy Tu B'Shvat, Rosh Hashanah Lilanos, and may it be a time of renewal of your sap, and to recognize the productive kochos that HaKadosh Baruch Hu put into all of us. Okay, see.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right.
No night class.